And we do have some breaking news that we want to bring you right now. We're going to go to a live picture from New York City. Apparently, a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center in New York. 8:52. We have limited information at this point. We don't know about injuries in the building or people on the ground, but obviously this has potential for being a major disaster here. Look at that picture.
Now, remember, there's two World Trade Centers. What we're seeing there is the apparent impact of the plane. It would look to be on the upper 10 or so stories of this. I believe it's a 110-story building. The south, it looks like the south of the two towers there in the Wall Street area of New York City. It's incredible pictures right there.
Right, and we should point out, of course, that the World Trade Center was the target of that bombing several years ago. So this is an area that has had its share of problems. We don't know yet whether this was an accident, some sort of planned incident. We just want to show you this picture here, and we are trying to get some information about exactly what happened. We don't know what happened, but we are being told that a plane hit this building, the World Trade Center building. One of the, as you pointed out, there are obviously a couple of buildings in the complex.
And an enormous amount of damage there. On one of the two of the World Trade Centers, there is, of course, a restaurant, Windows on the World, which takes up the upper part of the building. I'm not sure whether it is this tower or the tower that's next to it, but you can see they're massive, and now we're starting to see, Lark, some flames coming from beneath, from right in the point of impact. You might also point out the other famous tall building in New York City, which is the Empire State Building, had a similar incident back in the 40s when a World War II-era bomber crashed into that building. Here, apparently, perhaps the same thing. Now we're seeing some other pictures from lower Manhattan, the Wall Street area around the towers.
Right, and as you pointed out in the closer shot, you could see the flames there. Again, we're listening to see what this woman is saying here for a second.
Inside.
It was inside.
Because it looked out, everything was coming out. All the windows were coming out, all the papers were
What is on
out.
the sidewalk?
I didn't see anything.
Was there any people hurt, do you know?
Ran, and everyone in the path train just ran. I don't know if anyone was hurt, but I assume they were because the windows were all blown out.
All right, thank you.
Ollie, you would have to assume a very, very terrible situation if that indeed is the case, because I'm sure there were people.
So again, they were talking about the windows there of that building being blown out. We can see flames there, and we should point out right there are offices in that building. This is a very busy area there in New York City, many businesses. So this really is an incredible scene.
A very key observation there by the person who was making speaking there to the local reporter, saying everything was coming out. And of course, obviously, at this stage of the game, we have described this as the possibility of some sort of aircraft crashing, and we see no evidence of it right there. And there is, of course, a lot of concern as to what may have happened, whether this could have been something natural, something planned, something criminal, or something accidental. We don't want to lead into any speculation right now, but no doubt those types of interviews will be coming in and very important to determining just what happened. But as you can also see there, Lark, relative to any sort of plane crash, it is a clear and looks like a pretty decent day there. We'll check in with Tom just a second, but Tom, doesn't look like there's any obstruction at all in the air over there in New York.
Right, it certainly would not appear. It looks a little gray, but not fog shrouding the top of the building, so that apparently would not have been a factor there. We're also told there may be some sort of a pad on top of the building, but of course that would probably be a helipad, right. not a place where a plane.
At one point they used to, well actually, yeah, there may have been help.
Let's listen in from some local coverage from WNYW.
It was like a plane that I board on to go, to, wow.
So this wasn't just a small Piper Cub or something that, that had gone the wrong way, and of course, we would, the weather, I take it, where you are is just about picture perfect.
Picture perfect, yes. It's very clear outside.
So there would be the suspicion then that anybody who would drive a plane smack into the middle of the World Trade Center would have done it on purpose.
It would seem that either that or they lost control, but I can't see something like that. I mean, it was like right into the building, so, and it was coming low. Because if I was to see a plane that was going high, and all right, but this was coming low. It's very visible.
Can you see the streets below the World Trade Center?
No, I cannot, because I'm on Hudson Street.
You're on Hudson?
Yeah, I'm on Hudson Street in Franklin. So
now you say you were out there grabbing a smoke when it happened?
Right.
What did the other people do when they heard the noise?
Well, there was nobody. I'm up on the 14th floor.
Oh, you were on the 14th floor.
Yeah,
I see.
So I'm not street level. I was up on the 14th floor, and I was just like looking out, looking out, just watching the scenery. And when I saw the plane.
All right, Rosa, thank you very much. Talking with eyewitness Rosa Cardona Rivera on the 14th floor of a building very close to the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. And once again, Dick Oliver was on the scene down at City Hall reporting to us. However, our transmitter is located on top of the World Trade Center building, so that apparently caused our picture from that remote to just go out on us. But once again, yes?
I was just saying, I can imagine what the people there must be going through, given what happened there a decade ago.
Yes, Dave?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, if it indeed was a plane, the FAA or the control towers at one of the 3 major airports should have record of what's in the area. Sometimes they do vector planes around the southern tip of Manhattan. We might want to get a hold of Nick Gregory, who's a certified pilot and again flies through the area pretty regularly. Number two, even though planes typically are not that close to these buildings, with the possibility of anything from engine failure to hydraulic failure, you lose control of your ability to control aircraft. You can see right now probably police helicopters hovering right around the towers, but again, wind speeds at this point not tremendous at all. Flying conditions near perfect.
And of course, they would have to, under ordinary circumstances, have filed some sort of a flight plan. If it were a plane that, and it apparently, according to the lady we spoke to, eyewitness just a few moments ago, she did see a plane go in there. Now, I'm told that it may be a twin-engine plane that simply smashed. It looks like it went head-on, smack into the World Trade Center building. One could only expect, given the weather conditions, given looking at that picture live right there, that it went smack inside the World Trade Center. And if that is the case, I'm afraid we've got a tragedy on our hands.
We've got something coming across the wire here, James, but actually it's nothing more than what you've already been reporting. Witnesses report hearing a huge explosion.
Yeah, well, we're looking at, there's no doubt there was a huge explosion and fire, lots of black smoke coming from that building. Black smoke, again, would indicate that the fire is nowhere near under control. I expect they have sprinkler systems in there.
Jim?
1 second, Dave. I'm told we have a witness named Jim on the phone, an eyewitness. Jim, are you there?
Yes.
Jim, what's your last name, Jim?
Last name's Friedel.
Jim, tell us what you saw, if you would.
Well, I was looking out the window, and normally you'll see planes kind of flying low over the Hudson, but this is a large plane. It's something like a 727, and it was banking, and the only reason I kind of looked at it is because I thought it was rather low. Banking very hard, and then it just drove right through the World Trade Center tower.
What's your vantage point there, Jim?
I am actually across the Hudson in Hoboken, but I have a clear view right at the World Trade Towers.
Now, it did seem to you that it was done on purpose?
You know, I don't know if I can say that, but it was a very odd type of turn. It was headed directly at the building. So whether that was on purpose or not, I can't tell. I don't know if he was trying to avoid or they were headed for it. Describe that turn for us, would you? It was particularly heavily banked? It was pretty heavily banked, maybe 45 degrees. Again, hard to tell. It was kind of unremarkable because you do see planes fly through here. It was a large plane, like a 727, and that's the only reason I kept looking, and then it went right into the building. I just thought it was going to follow the river and keep on going, but it didn't. Now, after the plane struck the building, from your vantage point, it apparently went directly inside. That's correct. And if that's the case, my goodness. Yeah, actually, as the impact occurred, you could see debris flying out the other side. So it apparently went right through the... we're looking at a live picture of the building right now, Jim, and what would you say that would be, about the 90th floor or so? Yeah, I can't tell if it went right through, but certainly debris was shot out the other side of the building. Did you hear anything when it took place? Did you hear the crash? Yes, I did. In terms of anything beforehand, though, no. I mean, I couldn't tell if the plane was in distress or anything like that, but certainly when it hit, there was a large explosion, and again, you had smoke and debris coming out the other side as well.
All right, Jim, thank you very much. Been talking to Jim Friedel, eyewitness who witnessed the crash from Hoboken. Thank you, Jim, very much for giving us what you saw and heard. Again, just a few minutes ago, apparently a large plane, according to that eyewitness, Jim Friedel, vantage point from Hoboken, that as you look at the picture from our chopper now arriving at the scene, Jim Friedel in Hoboken said it appeared to bank sharply and smash directly, perhaps purposefully, into, oh my goodness.
Oh, God.
There's another one.
Oh.
Oh my goodness, there's another one.
This seems to be on purpose.
Oh my goodness, now it's obvious, I think, that there's a second plane just crashed into the World Trade Center. I think we have a terrorist act of proportions that we cannot begin to imagine at this juncture.
Oh my God.
My goodness. A second plane now has crashed into the other tower of the World Trade Center. Obviously, suicide, terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. What we have been fearing.
Chopper 5. Anybody on?
What we have been fearing for the longest time here apparently has come to pass. A disastrous terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. Both towers, planes smashing into each one. I understand we've reestablished contact with Dick Oliver. Dick is on the phone. Yeah, Dick.
Jim, yes, just moments ago, as you know, another vehicle, some kind of an aircraft, crashed into the World Trade Center. This is no accident. This is no bomb from inside. This is, as you put it, a terrorist attack. There's no two ways about it.
Dick, what vantage point are you at now?
We're still at Park Row. People are streaming down, heading away from the World Trade Center, having heard the second blast. People are running, some of them running now. Emergency vehicles still heading towards the World Trade Center. Now, thick black smoke. I don't know if you've got a picture. We're trying to take some pictures here for you. Black smoke coming out of the second explosion. The first explosion seems to have calmed down somewhat.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, there's gray smoke coming out of it, meaning that the water is being put on it. People continue to stream past us here on Park Row, as well as emergency vehicles. There's an ambulance, there's a fire vehicle, and a police vehicle.
My goodness, Ollie, if I can only begin to imagine the carnage that has taken place. We see an ember falling from the top of the floor of the Empire State Building. It's tough to look at, but let's look at it once again. After a plane crashed into the side of the World Trade Center, then another one, as our cameras were focused on the building, crashed into the other tower.
Jim, is now a very serious fire on the south tower of the World Trade Center. This is about, I would estimate, about the 60th or perhaps the 70th floor of the tower, right on the corner, the northeast corner of the south tower, flames shooting out of the building. We have absolutely no reports of who was in there, but you've got to believe that being around the 9 o'clock hour that people were just sitting down for a day's work in those buildings.
Jim, I was just thinking that if I'm not mistaken, remember several years ago, Mayor Giuliani moved the emergency management office to one of the higher, to the 30th floor or around that area of one of the towers of the World Trade Center, and that's indeed the brain of all the emergency management activity. And now,
I believe, though, that's in one of the other towers. Ollie, can you talk to that? Ollie, can you hear me?
I hear you, Jim.
Dave brought up the point that the mayor's emergency management office, the so-called bunker, is in one of the towers of the World Trade Center, but I don't believe it's one of the two top ones.
No, it's not. It's about the 30th floor. It is not up there. And by the way, for those who are wondering about the structure itself, both towers appear to be structurally sound, and not only small pieces of debris are circulating in the air around where the explosions occurred. The buildings themselves seem to be intact as far as their structure is concerned. There have been talk over the years about about the threat of terrorism making the buildings fall down onto the streets. But I can reassure everybody that they seem to be holding up fairly well while efforts are going forward to fight the fires and whatever happened in those two towers.
Now we can see smoke emanating from many of the floors of the two towers. We see to the left of your picture there smoke coming out of the floors above where the plane crashed into, I believe that's the North Tower that we're looking at there.
Thousands of people gathered where I am here at City Hall Park in front of City Hall, just watching what's going on. It's very difficult to, they come by and they say, what happened, what happened? And you just got to say something hit the building and then something hit both buildings.
Well, we saw clearly, we didn't see the first one, but we saw clearly that a plane deliberately crashed into one of the upper floors of the World Trade Center. That was the second plane. So two planes crashed into the upper floors of each of the World Trade Center towers. And I understand now that Port Authority headquarters are in one of those buildings somewhere near that location.
Jim, I
yes?
don't know whether we've confirmed that this was an aircraft, or to be more specific, some people said they...
We've been watching live coverage from our affiliate in New York City, WNYW New York, of this unimaginably horrible situation. Now, apparently, a terrorist attack against both of the World Trade Center Twin Towers in Wall Street area of New York City.
Yeah, if you are just joining us, what you're seeing here, the live pictures there from New York. At first, one plane crashed into a building, very unclear as to what happened. Was it an accident? And then at about 9:03, a second plane. Do we have that tape to roll showing the second plane hitting the second tower? Let's take a look.
And there you see it. There you see it. And as witnesses have described, this seemed to be very deliberate. They described the first plane going into the first of the towers as having to bank and make a turn directly in. But, Lark, as you look at that video, it appears the plane flew directly in.
Unmistakable, right. And here we're going to show it to you one more time. You can see this plane slamming into that second tower there. And it is important to note that the World Trade Center was the target of a terrorist attack some years ago, and the trials went on for years. Much contention, an international story. And here now, again, apparent deliberate attack. Of course, we don't know who's behind it. As of yet, we've seen no claim of responsibility. We expect that will become later. Are we back now to the live picture? We're going to show one more time.
We're going to look at the tape one more time, and let's try to concentrate on the size of the plane, because obviously that is a very significant, if you're looking at those towers, are 110 stories each. That is a very large aircraft. Now, someone described it, one of the witnesses described it as not a prop plane, a twin-engine prop plane, but perhaps some sort of jet-propelled aircraft, a 727. Would be enormously significant if someone was able in some way to get their hands on a 727 or a similar sized commercial aircraft and then crash it in.
And then crash into a building there. And we do want to point out that that second attack happened just about 9:03, the first one shortly before 9 a.m. We're going to go back to live pictures now. We're going to rejoin the live coverage in New York City. Obviously, this is a disaster of major proportions. We don't have any word yet about casualties. So let's listen to the live coverage.
This day when we're holding a primary election in New York City.
Now, I would imagine...
Ollie?
Jim, what you're saying could be a drone aircraft. That's an aircraft that's guided electronically to its target without having a pilot. Now, that is a possibility as well. In the meantime, I can tell you that flames are shooting out of both towers now, the heaviest being on the south tower, the northeast corner of the south tower of the World Trade Center, but there's a considerable blaze going on the North Tower as well.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any way of finding out exactly what is located on those upper floors. You'd like to just cross your fingers and pray to God that maybe there weren't a lot of people up there at that time.
State office buildings and, of course, lots of commercial office buildings on those spaces as well. I know during the last terrorist attack on the World Trade Center, My son was in the building, and he told stories of groping down through the staircases for some 50 floors before he, thank God, got out safely.
In fact, the governor has an office in the World Trade Center as well. There is one thing. After the bombing of the World Trade Center in the 90s, I do know that there were major efforts to have disaster drills, to have a preparedness plan in the event of an awful tragedy like this. But one has to wonder how, with two gigantic skyscrapers burning, the fire department and emergency services can handle both in that confined space without a tremendous death toll.
No matter how much you set in place, how much you try to prepare for, until it actually happens, it's just not the same thing.
Again, you're looking at a live picture of the World Trade Center, where shortly before 9 o'clock this morning, and then shortly after 9 o'clock, planes apparently deliberately crashed into the buildings. Alani DeVito, are you there? Alani DeVito, are you there? I understand we have another eyewitness to this catastrophe. Lonnie DeVito, are you there? Apparently we lost Lonnie, but again...
This may be confusing to some people, because in a sense it is a little confusing to me. We every now and then see what looks like, I don't know if it's the bottom of a chopper that is swinging back and forth.
That would be our...
That is ours.
That would be the rudders from our chopper every once in a while.
Hey, Jim.
Lonnie DeVito, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Lonnie. Thank you. This is Jim Ryan in the studio. Can you tell us what you heard and saw when the blast took place?
Right now, I was actually talking to my brother on the phone about what happened. I was on my roof and I saw something from where I am. I really can't see what it is. I saw something go into the other building, because from where I am, I could see the World Trade Center.
Since 1993, once again, we're going to go back to the World Trade Center bombing, a car bomb at the World Trade Center, killing 6 people. The NYPD, the terrorism squad, New York City police have definitely heightened their sense of security at landmark buildings throughout the city, from the World Trade Center to the Empire State Building to the UN. All of this is definitely...
Okay, we've got Melinda now, who's live for us. She's been taking these pictures. Melinda, tell us what you're looking at. Melinda, can you hear us? All right, we're going to go to Melinda in just a few minutes.
Good morning. You're looking at live pictures of the World Trade Center Tower 1 from Manhattan Lower District. As you can see, we have a very serious fire in the World Trade Center. What we understand, the information is still early in coming, but what we understand is that 2 separate planes have hit Tower 1, which is the tower that you're seeing on your picture right now. As you can see, there are flames. There is a massive fire here at this Tower 1 of the World Trade Center. It's in the upper portion of the building, probably the upper quarter of the tower. Now, of course, the problem with fighting something like this is that it is you can't do an external attack. Firefighters are going to have to go on the inside of this building to actually fight this particular fire. They're going to have to be using things like high-rise packs and standpipe packs. They're going to be setting up a command center here, and they'll be using a cascade system to refill their air bottles. Now, the air bottles only carry 30 to 45 minutes of air, so you can imagine what it's going to be like to try to attack this fire, because they're going to have to climb up this many stories to get to the actual fire, and then probably immediately have to turn around and get their air packs repacked. Now, what we understand is, again, 2 separate planes have hit this. We don't understand why at this point, but we do know that 2 planes, we're not sure what size planes they were, but we think they were substantial in size, have hit the World Trade Center. This, again, is Tower 1. We do not know exactly what happened as far as to why they have hit this, but you can see that there is a big plume of smoke which is towering into the air. I would say it goes back a couple of miles at this point, even further. You can certainly see it from almost anywhere in this area. Both towers have smoke coming out of them, so it is possible at this point that Tower 2 is also on fire. It's hard for us to tell at this vantage point. As you can well imagine, police are keeping us at distance from this so that they can do the work they need to do. What we recommend to you people who are watching this from Lower Manhattan is to please turn off your water. Do not use any water that you do not need. Do not use your dishwasher. Do not use your washing machine. Firefighters need all the water pressure they can gather at this point. It's also a very good idea to stay out of lower Manhattan. Firefighters and other emergency equipment are trying to make their way there right now. And as you can imagine, this has probably already been made an all-hands emergency. That basically means that everybody, even if people are off of work right now, they have been called in to battle this blaze. Again, for those of you who are just joining us, you are looking at live pictures of the World Trade Center. That is Tower 1 on your screen right now. 2 separate planes have hit the World Trade Center. We are not certain why that has happened, but it has happened. You can see the flames through the smoke there, and there is a very dark, nauseous fume coming out of that. We can almost smell it from where we are, which is several miles away at this point. You can also see the plume of smoke from many, many miles away. Now, again, as we said, it's going to be very hard and very difficult to battle this blaze because it is in the upper portion of this tower. Tower 2 also has smoke coming out of it, and we, again, are not sure exactly what that is about. We'll, again, try to keep you up to date with this as we get more information, but what we do know is that 2 separate planes have hit the World Trade Centers. We do have firefighters on the scene. They are going to have to do an internal battle of this blaze. They cannot do anything from the external because it's so
with
high.
Michael Gargiulo here in our Fox 5 studio. We are monitoring the situation in New York City. We want to bring you up to date in case you are just joining us. Apparent act of terrorism in New York City. 2 different planes have hit those twin towers there of the World Trade Center. The World Trade Center, of course, the target of a bombing in 1993.
Now, the 2 towers are referred to as Tower 1 and 2. Tower 1 is the tower closest to us. This was hit first. It was hit higher up, we believe, on the 90th floor. There's 110 floors. Amazingly, then, there is video that we're going to show you shortly of the second impact on Tower 2, the tower further back. That one coming lower. We're going to see that now in just a second. And here you're going to be able to see the size of the plane. Let's take a look at it. And you see it slowed there. And that's the second impact lower, we believe, perhaps in the 50th, 60th floors. A large plane in Newark, also another development, perhaps related to where these planes came from.
That is correct. There is now a report that the FBI is investigating a plane hijacking, reports of a possible plane hijacking before these World Trade Center crashes.
Needless to say, all of New York City's 30,000 police officers, the entire fire department, virtually every emergency service person on duty in the New York City area is on their way or there now.
We also should note that this is also primary election day in New York City, where they are choosing the candidates in the mayoral election. We'll see if they suspend the voting because of this incident. Of course, again, that'd be highly unusual, and we are still awaiting word on injuries, fatalities from this incredible, horrific scene there in New York City.
The irony was that after the World Trade Center bombing, which took place back in 1993, so much effort was made to secure the garage area because that's where the
other incident took place.
The other incident took place, and if you drove by that area there, which is right by the tunnel area, the Battery, as it's known in New York City, down near Wall Street, there were all these barriers, all these things set up to prevent unauthorized people from getting in. You remember they rented a Ryder truck and drove it into that garage. Now, of course, an unimaginable turn of events hitting the same very prominent target from the top. We should also point out, with regard to casualties, Lark, in February 26, 1993, that bombing that shocked all of us, 6 people were killed, more than 1,000 people were injured. We cannot hazard a guess what's going on right now.
We're going to go back to the live coverage from WNYW in New York. Let's listen in.
Type of other attack. We're not exactly sure what happened yet. We do know 2 separate planes. We feel that they are fairly substantial in size from initial reports. We do not know exactly what they were. But again, both towers are on fire. Tower 1 obviously suffering the biggest fire from what we can see at our vantage point. We are not able to move to a different point simply because the police have asked us to stay back so they can do the work that they need to do in this general area. They are setting up a general command center, or at least you would be expected for them to be able to do that, to be able to set up a general command center. Now then, high-rise packs are being used here. We have a cascade system, which is used to refill the air bottles. Air bottles carry to 30 to 45 minutes worth of air, as we just mentioned, and that's how they're going to have to use this because these fumes are very noxious. If you're somebody, again, watching from the World Trade Center, it's a good idea if you're in the middle of this fire to be sure and fill your door before you actually open it. If it is hot, it is better to leave the door closed than it is to open it and let the flame in. Also, it's better to hit the floor and not stand up. Smoke rises, and the smoke, of course, will go to the ceiling if you are watching this from the World Trade Center. Again, use the stairwell. Do not use the elevators. That is the worst thing that you can do. For those of you who are not in the World Trade Center and watching this down in Lower Manhattan, please turn off your water. Do not use any water you do not need. They will need all the water pressure they can possibly garner at this point. This is a tough blaze to battle. Obviously, if a jetliner hits or any type of plane hits an World Trade Center like this, there's going to be a lot of fuel on board possibly. That fuel is very difficult to put out, and of course all the other stuff inside the building itself, which is going to give quite a bit of fuel to this fire. Firefighters will probably issue an all-hands call. That means everybody who is available, including those who are off for the day, will be called in to battle this blaze. That is the highest of all alarms, higher than a general alarm, and that means firefighters from all over the area will be called to battle the blaze. Again, it will be an internal attack. They cannot do anything externally because of the height of this. It's the top portion of the World Trade Center, the very top portion of the World Trade Center. We have maybe, I would say it's probably the top fifth of the World Trade Center, Tower 1, and maybe the top half of World Trade Center 2. Again, we're not sure if both or one of the towers was hit by a plane, but we do know 2 separate planes hit the towers, and that has resulted in this battle of the blaze that we are watching right now. We do see flames in Tower 1. You can see it at the base of the smoke on the left, and we do know that there's some very serious fire which they're having to battle here today.
Okay, that was Melinda Murphy. You've been listening to Melinda Murphy live from Chopper 11. Over what you can see is a raging fire. 2 planes. Now, we just got this in. A senior government official, speaking on condition of anonymity, said that the FBI is now pursuing reports that one or both of the planes that crashed into the 2 towers of the World Trade Center were hijacked, and the crashes may have been the result of a suicide mission. And we should stress that these are preliminary reports, but the quote is from the FBI, it certainly does not look like an accident.
Now, the New York
Here's the plane. We're going to replay it. This is the second plane that crashed into Tower 1. This happened just after 9 o'clock this morning. The first plane crashed in 18 minutes before. Again, the FBI now reporting.
Once again, you are looking at pictures there of this incredibly horrific scene unfolding in lower New York City, lower Manhattan right now. Both towers, towers 1 and 2 of the World Trade Center, hit in an apparent suicide bombing attempt. The FBI investigating reports that one or both of those planes, possibly jets, possibly commercial-sized jets, may have actually been hijacked and then flown directly into the towers. And you're looking at the scene now. Now, this is the view from the New Jersey side. Just over the Hudson River there, the East River rather, the Jersey side, and there you see just behind the Wall Street area where those 2 towers sit, and you can see now the smoke billowing from both. The plane that struck Tower 1, which is the forward tower to the right of your screen, hit higher up, we believe on the 90th floor of the 110th floor building. The second tower hit in an attack apparently captured on videotape, which we'll show you shortly, hit much lower, 50 to 60 floors up. And we're going to show you this second plane going in, and it goes in directly. Watch the right side of your screen.
It's happened just about 9:03.
Now, that would appear to me to look to be a plane, perhaps a 737. People said a 727. The 727 has 2 engines in the rear on the tail stabilizer. That would appear to be a 737 or a similar sized plane, and there you see the incredible fireball there. At this point, we have no word on casualties right now, but we can tell you that there's probably going to be very serious when these casualties do start to be reported.
Of course, the World Trade Center, a very famous building there in New York and a famous section of the city. Targets in 1993 of a terrorist bombing with trials that went on for years, international implications from that. They beefed up security considerably around those buildings after that incident, but that, of course, happened at the garage level, the lower level. Who could have imagined something of this proportion?
And this, Larkin, perhaps we have, months have gone by, but we can remember all the concern we had at the turn of the millennium, all the concerns about terrorism. Of course, the name Osama bin Laden was greatly mentioned, and precautions made against securing the borders. You remember a concern about people coming in from Canada. This was exactly the type of things people were concerned about. This apparently now happened. Clearly, this would seem to be the worst terrorist attack on U.S. soil, eclipsing even that of the Oklahoma City bombing. This looks to be just a horrific situation. And as Tom ironically points out, the weather absolutely perfect
Right.
day in New
Tom
York
told us
City.
right at the time of the attack, he said it was sunny, 64 degrees, and dry. So certainly, unless there had been some sort of mechanical failure, it was pretty clear that it wasn't weather-related. And then when we saw that second plane come in, it certainly became pretty clear this was an act of terror.
Lark, we're getting some word now on where the president was when this happened. We're learning from the Associated Press that President Bush was apparently reading to children in a classroom in Sarasota, Florida, when his chief of staff, Andrew Card, mentioned something about this to in his ear. The president briefly saw him before he returned reading, according to the wires, asked what he knew about the planes. The president is quoted as saying, "I'll talk about it later." No doubt we're going to be hearing, I would assume very shortly, from someone at the White House, and no doubt we'll also be hearing from the State Department and the Pentagon, which will apparently have some reaction to what's going on.
That's right. And we do, and especially in light of Oklahoma City, that we do want to be very careful, because that turned out to be an incident
Right.
of domestic terrorism. But we do know that the past incident in 1993, of course, was related to international terrorism, so we'll have to wait and see how the facts develop there. The president was in Florida pushing for his education initiative. They had expected this to be a week in which they would focus on domestic agenda, economy, education. I think that has changed.
These planes coming in apparently just about 9 o'clock. I believe they're 18 minutes apart. And there a loss of a signal from one of the helicopters that has been monitoring. But there we go back to a static shot from one of the other New York City television stations as you look at both towers, coming in right at 9 o'clock. This, of course, a time when people were streaming into the World Tower, the World Trade Center towers, the Twin Towers. New York City, for example, New York State occupies 50 floors in one of those towers. As we talked about, there's a famous restaurant, Windows on the World, on top of one of those towers. And also,
right, there are state and local agencies in the
building. And
building.
the New York City Emergency Command Post, which was moved up there for safety reasons.
Which apparently was moved up higher for safety reasons. So we don't know yet whether or not after the first incident, whether they started to evacuate that second tower. We can only hope so, but we do not have any word yet on what was the response. Because remember, as you said, these happened probably within 20 minutes of each other. Were they able to get mobilized that quickly? And this will be a massive mobilization here.
And of course, one of the difficulties here, as any firefighter can tell you, is when you're fighting fires on tall buildings, it's always difficult because you simply don't have ladders and material to get up there. Here you're talking about buildings both 110 stories each, fires on the 50th, the 90th floors. And one of the reporters in New York City were talking about how they're going to attempt to fight this, a series of temporary breathing apparatus that will let people in. But of course, the major question is we don't even know how safe it will be for firefighters
to
get into that
at all.
building
And
at all.
unfortunately, they may have to simply watch and wait and secure the ground areas before they even attempt to attack this.
We're also sure that an evacuation of sorts is taking place not only from around the Twin Towers area, but certainly that part of Lower Manhattan. No doubt they want to clear people out. That's probably the most crowded. It is the oldest area of Manhattan, and it is obviously one of the most crowded. Anyone who's been in rush hour traffic in the Wall Street area knows it's very, very different situation from even Midtown Manhattan. Very windy, narrow, tall streets, really a canyon of skyscrapers there. So that's not going to make it easier for emergency equipment to get down there as well.
We want to go back to live coverage from a local New York station. Let's listen in and see if we can get some new information.
I unfortunately will be going back to Washington after my remarks. Secretary Rod Page and Lieutenant Governor will take the podium and discuss education. I do want to thank the folks here at Booker Elementary School for their hospitality. Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
Just heard live comments there from President Bush speaking in Florida, his first public reaction to this tragedy, the president calling it a national tragedy. 2 airplanes hitting the World Trade Center, the president's words, an apparent terrorist attack. He has spoken to the vice president, the governor of New York, the FBI director, and pledged the full resources of the federal government, a full-scale investigation.
The president also vowing to hunt down and find those responsible for this attack, and then asking everyone to pray for the victims. God bless the victims and the families. And of course, at this stage of the game, a half hour or so after these 2 apparent attacks, we do not have definitive word on casualties. We fear that the toll may be very great.
I do just want to mention also that the president did say that he was going to be heading back to Washington. They are indeed scuttling that agenda to focus on education today. We are joined now by a terrorism expert on the phone, Emilio Viano. And please just identify yourself to our audience, your specialty, sir.
Well, I am a professor at American University in Washington, D.C., and I specialize in this area of terrorism.
Give us some history, if you can, about groups who would make these possible threats, perhaps against the World Trade Center. What can you tell us?
Well, obviously, there is plenty of motivation, plenty of motive in here, because we go back to the previous attack against the World Towers, the arrest of those that we deem were responsible, the trial against them, and the severe punishment that was handed out to them, particularly to the blind cleric that was the leader, supposedly, of the cell of the Hezbollah in New York. And so I think that there is plenty of motive there in seeking revenge for those proceedings and for the imprisonment of these people, and also, obviously, to keep demonstrating the vulnerability of the U.S. and the fact that it is not impossible to inflict severe damage against the interest of the United States. And the World Towers obviously have become now almost a symbol of the U.S., not only because they are in New York and in the financial district, but because they were already involved in the previous terrorist attack and all that meant in the struggle, as they see it, between militant, particularly militant Islam, and the interest of the U.S. as particularly a supporter of Israel.
Mr. Professor Viano, you have discussed Hezbollah, which we usually consider in terms of the Middle East struggle. What about, and what is the relation to, if any, to any connection to groups supported by Osama bin Laden, the Saudi Arabian terrorist?
Well, of course, this is a very intricate web of interests that work together. So we don't know exactly who is responsible at this point, but I think that thinking of bin Laden as possibly being involved is also something that is very plausible. Obviously, these groups work together, cooperate, support each other, provide cover, provide training, and obviously also facilitate action. Remember what happened, of course, Millennium approached with the possibility of a similar event in Seattle when those people carrying found and arrested there. So I think that it is very much connected, and obviously since there is tight security on the ground nowadays, particularly around something like the World Towers in New York, the most plausible and reasonable and practical way to do it was a suicide flight. And this is what happened in this case. Obviously, if you can find people who are willing to die, you can do lots of things, and it is obviously very hard to defend a tall building like that or any tall building like that in any American or world city against airplanes that are coming at you.
Professor, the FBI is investigating the possibility that these planes were taken in hijacking. CNN saying possibly an American Airlines 767 out of Boston. Can you think of any precedent where it was demonstrated that a hijacked plane or planes were involved in terrorism? Or is this a new air escalation of terrorism?
This would be definitely a major escalation, and obviously if this is the case, our hearts go out to those who perished in this horrible incident. From the films that we see of the event, indeed it looks at least that the second airplane was a big airplane, at least a 737 or maybe a 767. So obviously it is quite possible that it was a hijacking, and we can only imagine the terror of the people who were involved in all of that. definitely this would represent a major escalation, a very different technique, something that has basically never happened before. I mean, we had the Egypt Air flight that perished in Long Island Sound, but that was possibly, as we defined it, a suicide by one of the pilots, but it was self-inflicted without attacking any target. Here we have a precise use of the airplane basically as a bomb. And this is very new in the annals of terrorism, particularly in modern times.
Professor Vian, if I ask you, if we compare this with the earlier incident in 1993, you're talking about in there a situation where terrorists allegedly rented a Ryder truck, drove it into an unguarded basement, garage rather, and then blew up the explosives. Here, you're talking about a lightning increase in terms of the sophistication, the technology, and the coordination needed to mount this type of an attack. Given that, wouldn't it be likely that you could eliminate many of the smaller groups and concentrate? Could this be, in fact, the act of a government, an adversarial government, Iraq, Libya, some of the other countries that we have long suspected of supporting this type of terrorism, rather than the act of a cell, Hezbollah, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, that sort of thing?
Well, it is, of course, always possible. I don't think it is probable, because for a government to become involved in something of this size and symbolically so important that resonates throughout the world and definitely represents an attack against the U.S. would obviously mean putting itself into the category of rogue states against whom international sanctions can be mounted and life can become very difficult and unbearable. It cannot be excluded, because this is a very intricate web of alliances and mutual support. So it is possible, certainly, I cannot exclude it, and that is a good idea to follow, but I don't think it is probable. I think that it is more the work of some of the major terrorist groups, particularly most probably militant Islamic terrorist groups, that continue to keep the pressure up, using the World Towers as the symbol of the vulnerability of the U.S. and the fact that they can inflict serious damage, notwithstanding all the security measures that we are trying to introduce.
Professor, just help us out as we were talking about this possible escalation. I think it is important to keep in mind that after Oklahoma City, of course, the first thought was of international terrorism, but that turned out to be an act of domestic terrorism. Are there possible groups, these fringe groups, that might have a reason again to attack the World Trade Center, people who with like views of Timothy McVeigh, for example?
Well, you are right, of course, that indeed with Oklahoma City initially the attention was directed towards the Middle East when we found out that it was, of course, a domestic group or a domestic idea. But in this case, I think that the connection is different. In other words, obviously Oklahoma City in itself, just because of where it is and what happened there and the target of the bomb, explained a different motivation, a different modus operandi. Here, I think that the World Towers have already, through the trials of the terrorists who put the bombs there, has already been connected to Middle East violence and Middle East terrorism. So I think that it is reasonable to assume that it is something connected to that, particularly because there has been a lot of resentment on the way in which the trials were conducted, the very severe sentences that were handed out, and there was even talk that maybe the Taliban in Afghanistan were planning to swap the two Americans that have been arrested there supposedly for proselytizing Christianity in their country for some of the terrorists that were imprisoned as a consequence of the first bombing at the World Tower. So this issue has been kept alive in the Middle East, and I think it is reasonable to assume that there is a connection with that more than with a domestic issue in the U.S.
Professor Vian, if I may ask you about the goals and aims of whoever may be behind this. As you know from your time here in the United States as a professor at an American university, the American people will be shocked, they will be angry, and they will be very, very anxious for revenge. What possible motive could a terrorist have in terms of advancing their cause when this act, which no doubt is going to have a heavy cost of life, is going to provoke such an angry response from the American people.
But that is exactly what the terrorist wants. The terrorist wants, first of all, to sow fear in the minds and in the hearts of the people living in the area that has been affected. And it also wants to show that they have the power to do basically whatever they want, to strike and to inflict severe damage. And they want to excite the fury and the anger because they see that as playing right into these dynamics of escalating violence that then justifies further action of violence on their part. I think that obviously we will be very concerned, we will be very angry and distraught, particularly about the loss of life that this will entail, plus the loss of property. But I hope that we are also going to really dedicate ourselves to become much more involved in the Middle East situation. I think that while we pay a lot of attention to Russia, to China, and to other areas of the world, maybe the current administration has not paid enough attention, has not introduced enough innovative ideas how to address many of the festering
Professor,
issues
let me
in the
interrupt
Middle
you for
East.
just 1 second because we do have some new information we want to share with our viewers here in Washington, that there is a report of a fire at the Pentagon, and we have seen some smoke, so we're trying to get some more information on that. We do not know what's happening at the Pentagon, which brings us to what you were talking about, the Middle East and the Bush administration policies toward the Middle East. Okay, these are live pictures now of the Pentagon. You can see this thick black smoke. This is no trash fire, folks. So obviously something has happened at the Pentagon. This is a live picture of the Pentagon. This is not New York City. So we are obviously getting crews there to find out what has happened. Has something set off? Did something, let me ask our producer, do we have any indication that a plane was involved here? Keep in mind, okay, the Pentagon is not very far from National Airport. Some incident causing thick black smoke has happened at the Pentagon. So, Professor, have there been particular unhappiness from these terrorist groups with policies of the Bush administration? We know they've been unhappy about Iraq. Any other particular
Mark, I want to stop you right here. We do have an urgent wire now saying another aircraft, unbelievably, has crashed into the Pentagon. This is a preliminary wire. We will seek to confirm this, but this word just into us from our newsroom that perhaps another aircraft went in there. We should also point out here that as the professor has pointed out, there is no ready defense for this type of attack. Now, the Pentagon may be a different story there, and this is something we're going to check into right now. But as far as the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center goes, no apparent attack there. But now
also, now we're hearing that they're evacuating the West Wing of the White House. The West Wing, of course, is where the president's office is. The president is not there, but where the vice president has an office, the national security advisor. They are evacuating the West Wing of the White House. And as you said, they are now saying that a plane, incredibly, has crashed into the Pentagon. Folks, you're not going to see another day like this, I assure you.
Let us hope not. Let's bring everyone up to date. This is breaking news live from the Pentagon. Pentagon, you can see, almost totally obliterated by smoke. Apparently an aircraft has crashed into the Pentagon.
We want to make it clear when you say obliterate, simply that you cannot see it, because we are not suggesting that the building has molested. We are not sure the extent of the damage could be considerable, but we do want to make it clear that in some of the pictures you can see the building is still standing, but the smoke is so thick that you cannot even see the building at this point. Okay, we do want to make that clear.
And then as this is going on, we're also following the horrific situation in New York City with the planes, 2 of them apparently having crashed into the World Trade Centers, the Twin Towers you see there. One of those, now we have fair confirmation, an American Airlines flight hijacked after takeoff from Boston. Now, that leads to all sorts of other questions. We don't know who was on board that plane, how many people were on board.
How many people were on board that. Let me just get back to this Pentagon situation, of course, developing in our own backyard. Of course, this is the military center of the United States, the command center, and Associated Press reporters saying they saw, he or she saw the tail end of a large airliner plunge into the building. Again, a large airliner, so it's leading to suggest, again, this might have been a coordinated hijacking of airplanes to fly them in suicide missions using planes as bombs, as the professor put it, planes as domestic planes as weapons.
It would appear at this point, not to be overly dramatic, on a horrible, horrible day, that some of the major parts of the United States, in terms of public prestige, are under siege right now.
Okay, one more area now that we are going to be checking out, the National Mall. Is there a particular building on the mall? let me ask our producers. Okay, a report of a fire on the National Mall. Of course, we'll be checking that out as well.
The president was told of the first incident this morning in Sarasota, Florida. He left immediately after making phone calls to the vice president, the governor of New York. This was before the scenes you're seeing here. Now here, as Lark pointed out, you can see the buildings of the Pentagon. And of course, the Pentagon is constructed in a series of rings. Appears to be intact at this point, which is a good sign.
Which is a good sign.
We're hoping now, you can also see just off the right-hand side of your screen, a helicopter circling just to the right. We're hoping to get more information about the Pentagon. We do have a crew on the way to New York as well, we might point out.
Now, if we can, let's see if we can get a double box so we can watch the Pentagon unfold, as well as we want to keep our eye on the situation in New York City. That's right. And we're also going to try to find out what's going on in the National Mall, report of a fire there. So let's try to bring you up to date. Just before 9 o'clock, report of a fire at the World Trade Center, possible report of a plane slamming into one of the towers. And as we were on the air live at 9:03, you could see a second plane, clearly a large plane, fly deliberately into the second tower. And so you're seeing the two towers there in New York. Here we go. We're going to show you this happened just about 9:03. Watch the right of your screen. You're going to see the plane come into view there. Here we go.
And that may, in fact, be a 767, which is a modern, one of the newer jetliners put into place, significant too, because it can be flown with a crew of 2 rather than 3, we believe. But one of the new things, and now apparently 2 other things that are happening, Lark, just want to bring you up to date on that. We've just gotten word in that the U.S. Capitol, we believe, is being evacuated, along with the West Wing of the White House. And there we see over the old Executive Office building, you can see in the distance someone in the way there, but you can see right behind that technician there, the flames coming from the Pentagon. As we also see on the left hand of our screen, the flames coming from the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center in New York. This could be the start of a major event in U.S. foreign policy. Those events probably going to unfold in the next couple of hours, and we're hoping for more information as to what exactly the United States is going to respond. The amazing thing at this point, Lark, it would appear to me, would be the simultaneous hijacking, not of small planes that you can rent, but of major commercial jetliners.
Major commercial jetliners. And we had a professor on from American University who was talking about this as being an escalation of terrorism, a different technique that we have not seen. Of course, we've seen individuals strapped with explosives. We have seen trucks packed with explosives and cars, and now again to see airplanes used as bombs.
And now some confirmation and some more specifics on one of the aircraft involved, and this is back, we believe, on the first impact into one of the World Trade Centers, that now it is being identified as Flight 11, an American Airlines flight from Boston to Los Angeles. But at this point, we should also point out we don't know at what stage any hijacking may have occurred, whether in fact after the flight had taken off or perhaps before the plane was even boarded.
Okay, we have this report now from the FAA, the Federal Administration Aviation, shutting down aircraft takeoffs nationwide. So folks, if you're expecting to take a flight today, forget about it there, yes, because they are shutting down air traffic. And is it nationwide?
Yes.
Let's hear that. Is that confirmed, the FAA, nationwide?
Let's check.
This would be incredible. I think that would probably be unprecedented, to have a nationwide shutdown of air traffic.
So at this point in the United States, we have the Pentagon and the World Trade Centers in New York City attacked by terrorists in planes, hijacked, commercial aircraft hijacked. We have air travel in the United States stopped. We have the White House evacuated, the Capitol evacuated.
The Capitol, right.
It is as close in my 41 years to being at war as we have ever been. Perhaps an overstatement, but on a horrible day.
Only Congress can declare war, but it will be interesting, of course, to see what the U.S. response will be. I suspect it will be swift and strong once they are certain of what has happened here. I think perhaps if you were saying that is an act of war against this country, then yes.
I would think that would be the case. We are hoping now to get more confirmation and more information on any possible casualties from the World Trade Center. Of course, any if there are any at all at the Pentagon as well. Right. The last word we had was 1,000.
Right. We should point out, and we don't know how they're arriving at that figure, but yes, talking about reports out of New York again of 1,000 injuries, and it is certainly easy to believe that figure, and I'm sure soon we'll be begin to hearing from hospitals there in New York City, and we are checking as well with our local hospitals to find out if any people have been taken from the Pentagon.
Sources are also reporting now to the Associated Press that the White House was in fact threatened with terrorist attacks. So obviously good reason, and perhaps I'm sure that evacuation would have taken place even without that, considering the situation with regard to the Pentagon.
Yeah. We want to go back now to American University professor Emilio Viana, who specializes in terrorism. Professor, let's get your reaction to what is unfolding here. A plane attack against the Pentagon, against the World Trade Center. How do you describe this, Professor?
Well, it seems to me to confirm that it is a concerted, well-planned attack by people who want to inflict damage to the major institutions of the U.S. and of the Western world. Obviously, the World Towers symbolize the financial power of the U.S., Wall Street, etc., etc. The Pentagon clearly represents the might, the military power of the U.S. So it fits very well into the pattern of the attack on the USS Cole and on the embassies in Africa and other interests of the U.S. In the world. In other words, it is a well-planned, concerted attack on the U.S. as the world superpower, particularly, I would assume, because of the role it plays, supposedly or really, in the Middle East, in its hostility towards Iraq, Iran, and other Arab countries, and the support, obviously, of Israel.
Professor, you had mentioned earlier we had just begun to focus on the Bush administration when we got the word about the Pentagon. So let's talk about the current Middle East situation where we had seen the escalation of violence in the Middle East. So you are not surprised then that we are seeing something here as well?
Well, obviously, the Bush administration, we all know in part because it is new, certainly it has not taken a very active role in what is going on, particularly between Israel and the Palestinians, and it has confirmed our position towards Iraq and also towards Iran and other countries like Syria. And I think that it is time for the administration to indeed pay more attention to this area. We are paying a lot of attention to Russia, to China, to other areas of the world, but this is really the most explosive part of the world that in the end brings the conflict even here at home to us. So it is not something far away. It is coming right here at us, as we can see today in these extremely dramatic events that are totally unexpected. I don't think that we've ever had a day when the White House, the Capitol were
Professor, let me interrupt you for just a second because we have yet another development here. The State Department is being evacuated. The building's being evacuated. Again, not that there's been an incident there. Let's clarify that.
Precaution.
Is this a precautionary? Is this precaution?
As we look at the live pictures there of the Pentagon, this is a quote from an Associated Press radio reporter, Professor Viana, if you'll stand by. He says, "I saw the tail of a large airliner. It plowed right into the Pentagon, this fitting in with a pattern that apparently has been the case in the World Trade Center."
We have something else we want to tell because this affects our local viewers, that Metro is shutting down its trains. So again, possible concern that that Metro might somehow be used in this. So Metro is shutting down its trains. We're going to trust a person on as soon as possible to explain that, because obviously that will have a big impact on commuters, many of whom, of course, had already gone in, perhaps using Metro, and how they're going to get home this afternoon. But apparently Metro is also responding to this by shutting down.
Professor Viana, with regard to the Middle East, there seemed to be a great deal of anger in the Palestinian community over Israel's use of American equipment for this very controversial policy of assassinating, targeting directly and personally Palestinian leaders, where they would use these Apache helicopters that could essentially stand off the targets, and then they would fire guided missiles into a vehicle. Is that
or into a building? We saw one recently into a building,
and one actually into a car recently. Is this the type of policy that they have felt that would generate this type of anger that could lead to this type of thing? And as we point out, there is no indication at this point of any particular group's responsibility for these attacks.
Well, that certainly is one of the elements. I wouldn't say that it is the determinant reason why all of this is taking place, but certainly I think that the support that the U.S. is giving to Israel, both in politically and economically and militarily, is at the roots of most probably of what is happening here. But I wouldn't just limit it to the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians. I think that there is the whole issue of the sanctions against Iraq. There is still the whole whole issue of Afghanistan, Syria, Iran, and other areas where conflict between the U.S. and the Western world and Islam is festering. So I think that it will take some very bold steps and deep engagement on the part of the Bush administration. The tendency, obviously, is to be vindictive, to take revenge, to become even harsher. There are already television talk shows saying that we have to give Israel the green light to go in the Palestinian territory and do whatever they want. I think that would be, of course, a serious mistake. I think that what we have to do is to work for an equitable solution that takes into account the interest of different parties here, and also maybe be more innovative in how we deal with these, situations that are festering, that are difficult, that are complicated. But
Professor, once again, let me jump in as we ponder the bigger questions here. We do also want to keep people up to date on the local response. D.C. police now saying all available should report. All available should report.
And we also have some clarification now on what may have happened at the Pentagon. According to the Associated Press, that aircraft seen diving in towards the Pentagon apparently crashed on the helicopter landing pad near the Pentagon. You'll see these pads when you are on 395 and so forth. You can see them, so perhaps it missed the building directly. We don't know if that's the case, but the initial report now is it crashed on a helicopter landing pad near the Pentagon. We also have some other things to talk about in terms of close downs. As we pointed out, there is no air travel in the United States, commercial air travel at this time.
Right, so this is a massive response across the United States. Let's try to just bring you up to date on some of the things that are happening that will affect your life today. Air takeoffs across this country have been suspended. Metro is suspending train service. D.C. police calling in all officers today. So the city, the nation's capital, is mobilizing against this attack. And very soon we're going to join our Audrey Barnes on the phone. Is Audrey going near the Pentagon?
I believe Audrey is there now. Audrey, what can you tell us?
Michael, I'm on the grounds right across from the Pentagon, and what I can tell you is it is still on fire. There is black smoke just billowing throughout the Pentagon grounds. There are several hundred employees on the grounds. They are crying, hugging each other. I see about 15 different pieces of fire apparatus. I see ladders. It's just a scene of utter chaos out here. Traffic is still getting by in front of the Pentagon, but most of this roadway has been shut down.
Audrey, let me interrupt you to explain what people are seeing, because I'm not sure if you can see the picture. We do have a picture now where we can see some people, and we can also see the flames and the smoke that you're talking about and some of the emergency equipment. This is the first time we have seen that. So please go on, Audrey, from your vantage point with what you are seeing. But we can now see flames. We see emergency crews, and just a moment ago, we also did see some people there. So, Audrey, go right ahead.
Audrey Barnes, are you still with us? We'll try to recover.
We've lost that in a moment.
Right.
If we can, I'm not sure. Did we control this camera? If we could get them to pan back to the left here, let's try to see what detail that we can. Apparently, we've lost that picture as well. It's a camera that we don't control, but it's showing you there are active flames at the Pentagon, and you can see, obviously, some of the workers there watching this incredible scene unfold there at the Pentagon. We'll try to get you a number on exactly how many people do currently work in that building. But it is a major complex there in Virginia.
And the two things that we have been reporting so far is a radio reporter from the Associated Press saying he saw what he quoted as a large airliner diving directly for this building, and also a report from the Associated Press, which would be fortunate if were the case, that it may have hit the helicopter landing pad outside the building instead of going inside this building, which is made up, as you know, at one time perhaps still is the world's largest office building by space, going inside the rings itself. I believe this is a picture of New York City.
To New York City, and it appears that something else has occurred. We're not quite sure what, but apparently the level of the smoke, is it a slightly different area from the World Trade Center? Okay, it is now the base of the World Trade Center. There seems to be now a second area there of smoke. So perhaps indicating that some sort of explosion or fire there. Now, of course, what may have happened, of course, with all these systems compromised in the building, you may be getting an explosion from that. We do not know what has happened, but obviously something has happened there near the base of the building, setting off another round of major smoke and apparently a fire. But we don't know whether, again, it's because the building, because the earlier damage. Okay. The tower has collapsed.
Yeah.
The tower collapsed.
And it looks like we're seeing.
The tower collapsed.
Unfortunately, one of the worst fears that might have happened has come to pass. One of those towers, 110 stories, has apparently collapsed. We can only hope that the area around it was evacuated as might possibly have been in the time. We're going to try and get some more information on that. So this is a major update on this terrible day of developments. One of the two World Tower Centers, well, okay, now we're finding out that that may not have happened.
All right, well, now we should, or Associated Press is reporting that an explosion has hit another building near the World Trade Center. So, folks, obviously we're going to try to sort this out. This is a developing situation, but AP is reporting that an explosion has hit another building near the World Trade Center to explain this round of white smoke there you see billowing up from the bottom. As the professor was saying, this is well planned, this is concerted, this is major, this is an escalation, this is a different technique.
And all this happening now, it would appear, in the last hour and say 10 minutes or so, 18 minutes between the two impacts of the two World Trade Centers. And then, of course, we had the impact at the Pentagon. I believe that would have come, what, 45 and 50 minutes after that, somewhere around that time. Still waiting for casualty figures from all these places. The response here in Washington and in New York City has been fairly complete. Air traffic grounded in the United States. White House West Wing evacuated, U.S. Capitol evacuated, Metro, I believe, shutting down as well.
The State Department
and Treasury also being evacuated at this point.
It certainly would not be surprising if they decide to go ahead and send the federal workers home. We'll wait and see what we have to say about that. Let's see if we can get someone on the line from OPM or perhaps from the district's emergency management agency, what decisions they're going to make about what to do here. Keep in mind the D.C. Council, for example, just recently moved back into that Wilson building there on the heart of Pennsylvania Avenue, where the city leaders will also evacuate. So.
And on a much smaller scale, as you remember, we've had debate recently about reopening Pennsylvania Avenue and the concerns there, which was closed after the Oklahoma City bombing attack. Many people thought that perhaps was the time now to open it back up, and after this day, perhaps the debate will be changing on that. We are awaiting the latest updates on the situation, with things happening almost too fast and furious for us to report.
I do want to mention that we now have a report out of Chicago that the Sears Tower is being evacuated. Now, keep in mind, at one point, this was the world's tallest building. It is still one of the world's tallest buildings. So word now that they are evacuating, perhaps just as a precaution. Has there been any particular threat against the Sears Tower that we're aware of that is being evacuated, perhaps just as a precaution?
You're looking at the scene there. On the right-hand side, there are some new developments in New York City. We do believe that there was another blast after the two that rocked the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center towers. We are trying to determine now if this was a consequence of one of those two earlier attacks, or perhaps this was a separate explosion.
Or it was a separate explosion.
Right. We do believe
that's what we're trying to sort out. But it's beginning to appear that there was a separate explosion, but again, that cannot be sorted out at this moment.
And all these attacks apparently precipitated by the hijacking of commercial aircraft. And in one case, a 767 from on a flight from Boston to Los Angeles. We do not have any sort of specifics on the plane that may have hit the Pentagon, or as to the first plane, the second plane rather, that hit the World Trade Center. But this in itself would be a very dramatic development. Aircraft hijackings in the United States is not something that has happened in recent time, at least in terms of large commercial aircraft.
Of course, yeah, we do have Audrey Barnes back now on the phone. She has a view of the Pentagon. So, Audrey, yeah, there she is now. So, Audrey, tell us where you are and what you can see.
Okay, if you look over my shoulder, you can see the Pentagon is still on fire right now. I'm right beside it. You can see hundreds of Pentagon employees have been evacuated from that building, and it is still burning right now. Most of the fire, you can see the flames shooting up behind that little guard shack there. There are hundreds of people on the lawn, and every 5 seconds another emergency vehicle goes by to try to get this fire under control. We have seen employees trying to console each other. People are walking around in absolute shock and disbelief. Now, we were at the State Department right when this happened. We saw State Department police running out of the building, telling everybody, get away. And I look up and see this giant plume of smoke coming from the Pentagon. So we got over here, and this is what we found, the Pentagon on fire there. Still quite a scene of devastation out here. People really don't even know which way to go. They've gone away from the building. Now people are running back towards the building. Just a scene of utter chaos out here.
We've just received word that they are have shut down the 14th Street Bridge and the Memorial Bridge shut down.
The bridge is shut down. People are being able to pass by the Pentagon heading into the district, but there's no traffic going towards 395, towards Richmond, or 244. That's all shut down.
Audrey, if you would hold on for 1 second, we just also want to report now, the Associated Press now reporting an explosion has hit another building near the World Trade Center. We were speculating at that point whether it was a consequence of the original attacks. Now it appears to be another explosion hitting another building near the World Trade Center. Audrey, with regard to the Pentagon, the reports that we have received is that the plane may have impacted on that helicopter pad, and there's a small control tower there set up on that side of the Pentagon near where you're standing. Can you see any of the wreckage itself? Can you confirm that, or does it look like it actually impacted the building itself?
It is not on top of the building, and your description of a helipad seems to be what I'm hearing from people out here. And the fire crews are able to fight this fire from the ground, so it seems like most of the wreckage is on the ground right beside the Pentagon, and the smoke is just billowing from that side of the building. So that seems to fit with what you're saying about that helipad. We also have heard reports that witnesses have seen the tail end of some kind of aircraft going into the Pentagon. We are still trying to confirm that information.
Also want to point out that the Pentagon, after Oklahoma City, like all the federal buildings, security was beefed up though primarily against ground attacks, against truck bombers, more concrete barricades, and here now we have this attack by air.
And of course, you would also know that in military terms, defending against a close-in air attack is just about the most difficult thing to do unless you are standing there tracking these planes with anti-aircraft weapons at the ready. And, you know, this is almost a very, very impossible situation to defend against, especially in the case when you're looking at hijacked aircraft with commercial markings coming in on civilian targets, even a target like the Pentagon, certainly not a civilian target, but a national security target. Very, very difficult situation to defend against as we follow these develops. Audrey, are you still there with us?
I'm still here. I'm watching the scene from here.
What are they trying to get people to do? Are they just, at this point, moving them out into the outer reaches of the parking lot? What are they trying to do with traffic and with the people coming out of the Pentagon?
Okay, there's several hundred people that are still on the lawn of the Pentagon. It looks like now emergency crews are gathering everybody together, trying to get people in one big mass, and they're now walking towards the camera away from the Pentagon across the street on the lawn there. The road is shut down. Most of the people are on the other side in front of the Pentagon building. But at this point, it looks like there's a concerted effort to kind of gather everybody together and get them away from the Pentagon building. And there's still a pretty major fire. I mean, I see flames shooting up like 20 feet into the air, still on the grounds of the Pentagon. So this is far from under control right now.
Yeah, describe some of the equipment you can see. Where are they from? Who is responding to this at the Pentagon? What can you see?
I see, I would say, 20 different emergency vehicles, ladder trucks. I see plumes of actually fire hoses on the ground going, shooting at the Pentagon building in large volumes of water. You can see some now in your shot. Several volumes of water coming up there as they try to fight the fire.
And Audrey, are you within shouting distance of any of these workers, or are they keeping reporters back a distance from the workers who are out of the building now?
I'm going to try to get some people to come over and talk to me from across the bridge. They'd have to. There's like 6 lanes of dividing us. Right.
Let's go back to New York City for a second. The latest reports now from the Associated Press does say that one of those towers, this is World Tower Center 1, the second tower hit, has collapsed. And now that's the second tower, and we believe that was the one hit higher up. We do not control this camera. It is from New York City. But the Associated Press is reporting that the second tower has collapsed. We don't know if that's a complete collapse, a partial collapse, or whatever. We hope to see it soon. Once again, you're looking at Tower 2, and this was the first one hit just after 9 o'clock this morning.
Collapse certainly would not be a surprise given the level of damage in the fire and the fact that firefighters were unable to fight that fire because it happened so high up on the building. So it certainly would not be surprising if there is a collapse, partial or total.
And once again, on the left-hand side of your screen, you are looking at the Tower 2, the first one. This is all New York now.
Michael, if you can hear me, we just heard another explosion down at the Pentagon building. We just heard another loud explosion down at the Pentagon building just seconds ago.
That's our Audrey Barnes, who is standing nearby the Pentagon, saying they heard a second explosion. Audrey, did you see anything, since these other attacks have been aerial? Did you see anything flying overhead just before this explosion?
We can't see exactly where the source of the explosion was, but you could hear it very clearly with a loud boom. And I'm looking for another plume of smoke. I don't see anything right now. It might be still in that same general area where the fire is burning right now, but you could clearly hear another loud explosion. I'm being told from people on the scene that in Crystal City, a gas station is involved in a major fire there as well. A lot of fire equipment is being diverted to that scene as well. So this whole area, you can just see there's emergency crews still continuing to come here every second.
Yeah, we should point out for people who aren't familiar, Crystal City, of course, is very near National Airport, very near the Pentagon. It's this very modern sort of enclave with lots of high-rises and shopping center there. So you're hearing now that there has been some sort of incident at a gas station in Crystal City. Is that correct, Audrey?
That's what I'm told. I'm told a gas station in Crystal City is fully involved in a fire. We just heard another explosion, and just from my vantage point, it did not appear to come exactly from the Pentagon, like perhaps a little bit across. So I can't tell you what it is. I'm still looking for a plume of smoke. I haven't seen anything new from this vantage point.
So, Audrey, you think that there's a possibility that the second sound that you just heard did not come from the point of impact or the Pentagon itself?
It didn't sound like it, but it was clearly a very loud explosion in this general area.
And given the proximity of Crystal City to where you are, it perhaps might have come from that vicinity.
Right. It's very near the Pentagon. I can't tell you exactly where, but it was a loud boom right at the Pentagon.
Audrey, from where we're standing, from where we're watching, rather, it appears now we can start to see the shell of something there. Can you have any better vantage point on what may have, on an aircraft, see any wreckage at all now? It seems like the smoke is dissipating to a certain extent.
From what witnesses have said, they saw the tail of some type of aircraft go into the Pentagon building. I'm still trying to confirm that from somebody who's on the scene, but there's a couple of people who are coming from the Pentagon building that I'd like to see if I can get some information about that.
Sure, we'll give you a second.
People are really in shock out here.
Oh, well, I'm certain of it. Just can you describe, the expressions on their faces? We do want to give you a chance to try to talk to people what they were doing, what they heard, what they saw. But from what you can see, you just describe the looks on the faces.
Okay. Here, I'm just waving a gentleman over who was at the. Were you inside the Pentagon building when that happened, sir? Okay. First of all, tell us what you saw. You're talking with Fox 5. What did you see?
I was in the remote delivery facility, which is the area where they process incoming deliveries and so forth. We heard an explosion, and then about 10 minutes later, something came over the announcement saying to evacuate the building. So all we heard was an explosion. Nothing dropped in the ceiling or anything in the RDF, which is this building right here. I understand a plane has hit the building, so.
No, you said you were inside the building when this happened.
Yes, the remote delivery facility, which is a wing of the new Pentagon. So there's parts of debris of airplane and stuff scattered along the road here. So, and then I just heard another explosion up there. So someone told me a airliner hit the building. So
anybody describe the plane to you? How large was the plane that hit the Pentagon?
It was a commercial-sized airliner. I'm not sure how big it was. The gentleman just said he was setting on 95. Plane flew very low over his car and hit the building and blew his windows out of his vehicle, and he was on Interstate 395. So
looks like everybody's in shock.
It's unbelievable. It's a dark day, very dark day, and I just heard an explosion back over that way. I'm not sure what that was either. So I'm just trying to get home to my family and try to let people do what they need to do here and try to get people out of the way and let the emergency people do what they got to do.
What are they telling employees now? Did they give you any information over there about what you should do?
No, they actually have. I was inside here. They have the gates locked. I was able to jump over the gate to get out. They're not opening the gates. I don't know why. I'm sure it's a security concern, but they stopped people from climbing over the fence. So I was able to get out, and I was just going to walk down. Somebody was yelling for help, that they needed help, so I was trying to get down there, and then the security people were moving everybody back, so they must.
Did you see any fatalities at all? Anybody
no,
hurt?
I could not see. All I could see was I couldn't even see part of the airplane sticking out of the building. Apparently the tail piece is sticking out of the building, according to. That's what that was?
Lark and Michael, people are telling me the Washington Monument has just been hit. We're still trying to confirm that. We all heard the same loud boom out here, and we're now just kind of looking to see what it was.
Okay, so obviously, Audrey, we'll be looking into that or report someone in the background. We could just hear them telling this, to the other gentleman that perhaps something has happened at the Washington Monument. We will obviously try to get you some information on that.
So we're monitoring those situations there as they develop here. The situation at the Pentagon with the plane apparently now being described by witnesses as a commercial-sized airliner crashing at least very close to it. And there we see the U.S. Capitol, which has been evacuated, and you can see it there. And further down on the National Mall, we are going to check out.
We're going to try to get a picture of the monument if we can.
Right.
We're trying to get a camera in position to do that. But as that gentleman just said, a dark day. It is a dark day.
We also do have some confirmation and more specifics now on what we had been reporting about the possible collapse up in New York City, one of the World Trade Centers, but it's being described now as a partial collapse. And of course, that building was hit on a much lower level than the first impact, which came on the other one tower at the 90th floor. So this was hit on the 50th floor. It's being described now as a partial collapse. I believe we are seeing, is that New York City in the right-hand side? And this may be one of those towers. And do you see our situation here?
Let's just bring you up to date in case you were just joining us, or if you're trying. Now, here let's see. Is this a live picture of the monument here? Live picture.
And we do see.
So this is a live picture of the monument. So we
can we bring that forward so we can get a better view of it, if possible? Thank you very much.
See if there's anything that appears to be happening at the base. Certainly does not appear to be anything happening there. So let's hope that that is the case.
You are seeing, what you're seeing there is a slight smudge, but I believe that is on the lens of our camera. You can see two smudges, one to the upper left, one in the center. It just happens to be located on the monument, but we don't want to unduly alarm
anyone. That's correct. There's enough to be alarmed about. Let's just sort of go through what has happened here. Just before 9 o'clock, New York City, a plane crashes into the World Trade Center. 9:03, a second plane, clearly a large plane, now believed to be a 767, smashes into the second tower of the World Trade Center. Then here in Washington, smoke at the Pentagon. Turns out some sort of a plane, initial reports said a helicopter, but something crashed into the Pentagon or near the Pentagon, enough to set off major fire and explosion, resulting now in major evacuations in federal buildings around the city, and air traffic in the country has been shut down.
The Associated Press now reporting that a portion of the Pentagon has, in their words, collapsed. We're going to get much more specifics on that. This is the initial word from the Associated Press. We have no idea the extent of any such collapse as it may take place.
So it does appear now it was a direct hit.
It does appear that it was a direct hit. Hopefully, the damage, though, might hopefully have not been as bad as it had been hitting in the center of the building. Audrey is on the scene there, and we'll try to get some more information from her if possible. Also, in addition to that, the response of the government has been swift and immediate. Air travel basically grounded in the United States. We're going to go back now to Audrey Barnes, who has another eyewitness to the Pentagon attack. Audrey.
Michael, I have a witness who was inside the building when the Pentagon. Tell me what your name is, sir, and where were you when this happened?
Name's Lieutenant Colonel Terry Battle. I was in a meeting inside the Pentagon when we heard a loud boom. Was basically all you could say. We were in the middle of a briefing. Loud noise went off. And everybody started clearing out of the building.
At that point, what did you think had happened, or what have you heard happened?
I'm not really sure. We've been through these kind of drills before on evacuation of the building, so initially just thought it was an evacuation. But then once we got outside, clearly, as you can see the black smoke rising, we recognized that it was something very serious.
Witnesses describe a commercial airplane was actually what hit the Pentagon. Is that what you've seen from closer up?
I don't know. I was inside the building. I'm not sure what happened. I've heard the reports that are coming out, like everybody else, that there was a plane that hit the side of the building.
Audrey, let's ask the Colonel to stand by for a moment, because
right now the focus is on getting people
Audrey's
out.
mic if we can, because we do want to get to Dan Nickel with the U.S. Capitol Police. Tell us what's happening there at the Capitol. Dan.
10 minutes ago, we ordered a mandatory evacuation of the Capitol and all of the House and Senate office buildings. The buildings are now closed to the public, and we've ordered the staff members and also the members of Congress to leave the buildings.
Were there any specific threats against the Capitol, Dan?
No, this is a precautionary measure based on what's happening in New York and the attack on the Pentagon. We felt it was in the best interest of national security and the security of Congress and the citizens up here to close the buildings and do an evacuation.
Are the leaders in Congress now being afforded extra security? Are they being taken to secure locations? Where is the Speaker? Where are the majority and minority leaders right now?
We are taking extraordinary precautions now to protect the leadership of the Congress. We are responsible for their security, and we're taking measures to ensure that they are safe and they can continue to coordinate efforts with the President and the leadership of the executive branch. We're also taking precautions to protect the buildings and the Capitol itself.
Dan, would you be specific as to the extent of these evacuations? Does this Capitol evacuation then include House, Senate buildings, office buildings, Library of Congress?
It's all buildings
Supreme
under our
Court?
jurisdiction. We have 19 buildings under our jurisdiction. We've ordered mandatory evacuations of all of those buildings. They are now closed.
All right. And they will obviously be closed for the remainder of the day, Dan?
That's correct. We'll make a determination later on in the afternoon whether we'll have them open tomorrow or not. If they do open tomorrow, there will be extraordinary security measures up here, probably unprecedented, within the Capitol complex.
I say, Dan, I've been here 25 years. I cannot recall anything on this scale. Can you?
No, the closest that I can recall is the World Trade Center bombing that took place a few years ago, and the measures we took place during the Persian Gulf crisis. I anticipate that our precautions will exceed those measures.
Yeah, talk about the Persian Gulf, because I guess I was thinking about that earlier, that at the time there were, because of the threats, there were lots of concern at the time. I think so far that the response to this has even exceeding that already, even though we were bombing Iraq. Is that correct, Dan? Is that your memory as well?
That's correct. Even then, we didn't take the additional precaution of closing the buildings. Now terrorism has come to our shores, and we have to take what is reasonable and prudent to protect the national interest.
Dan, just for those watching, we do want to confirm that at this point in the buildings that you control in the Capitol complex, there have been no incidents, there have been no attacks on those structures and facilities right now.
That's correct. I want to stress that this is a precautionary measure that we're taking. There have been no incidents up here. There have been no injuries, fortunately, but we're taking this precaution to ensure the safety and security of everyone within the complex.
All right, thank you, Dan. We just want to mention they are also confirming that the State Department has been evacuated as well. Can you talk about other federal buildings? Obviously, you're coordinating with other services. Are we going to see a total evacuation of government buildings here? What's the plan?
I wouldn't want to speculate on that. Every agency has its own level of responsibility, and they'll take the precautions they deem appropriate for their responsibilities. Based on our responsibility to ensure that the legislative branch of government is safe and protected, this is a course we chose to take.
Let me just ask you, obviously we've had many terrorism scenarios related to the Capitol, biological, chemical, ground. Did they ever anticipate hijacking of commercial aircraft?
It's something that's always been a concern, and it's a vulnerability that everybody has, and I think that's been driven home today, unfortunately.
Can you tell us where the leaders were when you got word of the attacks at the Pentagon in New York City? Were they at the Capitol?
We constantly monitor the congressional leadership for security reasons. I can't discuss where they were, what we've done in the interim, but I can tell you they are secure.
Okay. Dan Nickel with the U.S. Capitol Police, and obviously we'll be checking in with you throughout the day.
Okay.
What's going on? Thank you so much.
Take care.
Let's now, do we have Audrey Barnes? Is she still on the line there?
I'm still here.
Okay.
I'm still here.
We're going to go now to, all right, actually though, Audrey, we're going to ask you to stand by because I believe we're going to go to Skip Brandon, formerly of the FBI.
Formerly with the FBI, yeah.
Skip?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lark.
But tell us where you are right now and your reaction to this incredible dark day.
Yeah, I'm about 3 blocks north of the White House in our office. And this is absolutely astounding. It's something, I don't mean to make it sound humorous because it's a major tragedy. It's almost out of the movies.
Yes, absolutely. Skip, when you look at the groups that could have coordinated this type of massive, sophisticated attack using hijacked commercial jetliners with all the security precautions we have for that, where does it lead your thinking?
I'm always the first one to say, let's not point any fingers, let's keep an open mind lest we get swayed. But I'm going to tell you right now, it points me right into the Middle East to one group that's the obvious one on everybody's lips right now. It's Osama bin Laden's group. Nothing to back it up other than just saying that I can't think of anybody who's capable of something.
Who would be
like
capable of this.
Yep.
And let's talk about that. This is apparently he is well financed. Is that one of the major reasons that this is a person with money and with links in many countries? Is that why you would say that this appears to be his work?
Absolutely, and a long time building of infrastructure over the last 10 years around the infrastructure around the world. Yeah.
Skip, we just want to ask you to hold on for a second. We're now getting a report that a car bomb has exploded outside, and we want to stress this is outside the State Department, according to senior law enforcement officials. Skip, what we have here in the course of 2.5 hours is a clearly coordinated effort. Is this designed just to throw the United States into a state of shock?
Well, it obviously, yes, of course it is, and it's designed to bring home a message showing that we're vulnerable. Probably you can almost hear the invective spewing, vulnerable, impotent, et cetera, et cetera. This is going to change the way we live for quite a while.
Because after Oklahoma City, it certainly changed the way that we lived here in Washington. And so it is hard to imagine how many more barriers can we put up? What kind of response can you have to this kind of attack, Skip?
The biggest thing is once everybody moves into bunkers and stops living their life, the other side's won. I think we have to keep that in mind. However, we all have the right to live in a certain level of safety. In fact, there will be more barriers. There will be more measures taken. There's no question about that. Right now, it's very obvious. Just travel is going to be much more difficult because of the need.
Help us understand what's going on right now in terms of how these federal agencies are coordinating a response to this kind of attack. Who is getting together right now? Which agencies, which working groups? What's going on now?
This is one thing that's unfortunately through practice, but also through rehearsal, will be something that, given the enormity of this, will be very smooth. All of the law enforcement agencies and intelligence agencies are immediately linked when this happens over secure networks. The command centers have all been activated, and they're moving back and forth. This is one thing that will be operating rather smoothly right now with good communications.
Okay, so a lot of discussions obviously going on right now trying to coordinate the response, but from the intelligence community, FBI, and law enforcement.
Yeah, but the interesting challenge here is that normally when you have something like this, you have an incident. Right now, we apparently may have a series of unfolding incidents or things that may be happening, so you have not only investigative and intelligence work, but you also have right now everybody on high alert in a preventive mode, so this is a little unusual.
Skip, could you hang with us just for 1 second? We want to go to our reporter who is outside the Pentagon right now. She has an eyewitness. If you'll stay with us, Skip Brand, formerly of the FBI. Audrey Barnes, go ahead outside the Pentagon.
Coming in to the Pentagon this morning, identify yourself and tell us what you saw.
My name is Ed Hudson. I was coming to work at the Navy Annex. I was passing by Fort Myer, and I saw a large airliner-sized plane, roughly a 767-sized airliner. Very deep descent, approaching the Pentagon. As I didn't actually see the impact, but I did see, hear the blast, and saw the smoke rising from the crash later. And this was, just shortly after hearing the news about the crashes at the World Trade Towers.
Now, it did not look like that plane tried to avoid the Pentagon at all?
No, it seemed deliberate. It was outside the normal flight patterns for a national airport.
I've seen debris 20 feet from where we're standing. Have you seen debris also?
I did.
Describe what you've seen over there.
It just seemed like parts of the landing carriage or possibly the engines.
What are they telling employees? Within the last, I should tell everybody, within the last 10 minutes or so, they started a second evacuation of the Pentagon area. We're told that there's another aircraft that's been hijacked, and it's 20 minutes outside Washington, D.C. Emergency vehicle crews with bullhorns have been coming through this area telling everybody to get back. Is that what your understanding is as well?
Exactly.
Okay, now what about employees? Have you guys been given any information about what you should do?
Just told us to go home.
This is shocking and devastating for everybody.
It is. I think it's time that the American public realize that we are vulnerable. We're not in a situation such as World War II where we had two oceans to protect us.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ed Hudson was an eyewitness to that plane coming in this morning. He said it looked like a 767 commercial airliner headed right for the Pentagon, did not try to avoid the building at all, and within seconds, a huge explosion and then thick black smoke. And as you can see, the fire is still now up. It's not out here on the Pentagon grounds. Still lots and lots of smoke, and occasionally you can see a flare-up of flames here on the Pentagon grounds.
All right, Audrey, we need to interrupt you right now because of pressing developments taking place in New York where things have gotten even worse. And there you see the Twin Towers. Both towers now have apparently collapsed from the weight of the terrorist attacks mounted upon them about an hour and a half ago. So both towers, this is a scene from New York City, and you see the smoke enveloping lower Manhattan there. Both towers have now apparently collapsed.
Have now collapsed. Also, just want to bring you another local update. Prince George's County is calling in all of its fire and EMS workers. It's saying report to duty stations immediately, regardless of your schedule. So if you work for Prince George's County Fire or EMS, You are asked to report immediately, no matter what your schedule is today. Also, do want to emphasize once again, I think this is really the first definitive thing that witness that Audrey had, saying that indeed it was a large aircraft that crashed into the Pentagon there. Yes.
Dan Nichols, I understand, of the U.S. Capitol Police, you are still with us? Skip Brandon, rather, formerly of the FBI. Skip, I want to ask you specifically about what has been going on with the method of delivering these attacks, the use of hijacked commercial aircraft. Skip, I can't remember the last time a U.S. commercial aircraft was hijacked, let alone several planes in one day in the space of several hours.
No, this is extraordinary, and it has been years and years since a plane has been hijacked. It will be, well, this is incredible because you do get lax after a while, but actually I travel a lot by air, and our security is pretty good. I can't imagine how this happened, but it also goes right back to what I said. It points to extraordinary planning and patience to pull something like this off.
Yeah, talk about some of the measures that that take place at U.S. airports to try to prevent hijacks in terms of a screening of personnel. What should have been in place here?
We don't know at this point. The screening does seem to be good. It's pretty effective. I've been stopped many times, as have any frequent travelers, and had people go through it. It crosses my mind. A place I'd be looking would be at airport workers, people who are hired to do things like clean planes, things like this. They get behind the scenes. Is there a weakness there? I don't know, but that's a possibility.
So obviously, just give us some of the questions then that the investigators will be looking at. Let's just pose the questions. Put them out there.
Okay, right now, of course, the biggest thing is looking internationally, is trying to pull in intelligence, and I do say internationally because this would be...
Skip, hold that thought, because what we're seeing now is this horrific scene of, I believe, the second of the World Trade Center towers collapsing. I don't know if you can see it where you are. Just an unbelievable occurrence, a horrific
I just want to let viewers know what they were seeing there.
This is tape from New York City of the second World Trade Center collapse.
And believe me, as we switch back and forth, we will try to put locators up to keep you from being confused, but we just wanted to show you that very dramatic video of what happened there in New York City.
Skip, even things such as locking the cabin doors, you can't get into a cockpit door in a commercial jetliner.
You know, you shouldn't be able to, but I've noticed them open.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. But then, and obviously we don't know the scenario involved. We don't know if these were rogue pilots or pilots with guns at their head, but it seems incredible that these planes, sophisticated airlines, these are the most modern generation of airliners flown by commercial pilots today, could be flown on apparent suicide missions. You know, how could this, is there a chance that they slipped pilots on, suicide pilots, trained in these sophisticated aircraft?
This is one of the questions that will be raised. It strikes me as more likely that somebody got access to various cockpits and then with basically no training just took the pilots out when they got close. You're hijacked, fly me to Washington, then when you get close you just aim for the Pentagon. It's not hard to see. Same with the Twin Towers.
And there we're seeing another view. If we could just lose our banner on the lower third, because I think it's important to see the Statue of Liberty there.
Yes.
Ironic on this horrific day as you see smoke billowing over lower Manhattan, where up until a short while ago the 210-story World Trade Center towers stood.
Right. Well, Liberty certainly weeps today. No question about that.
But still standing.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Skip, in terms of what's going to go on in terms of a military response today, obviously we don't know who to respond to. What's going to be happening? We're assuming U.S. forces worldwide on their highest state of alert and readiness immediately. What will go on beyond that?
Immediately, it's going to be an awful lot of review and collection of intelligence and intense pushing of assets around, what we call assets around the world, people who might have information. That's what the major effort will be. Along with, and I say unusually enough, we usually have these and nothing else is happening right now. Everybody's on a highest alert, and there'll be a lot of defensive actions.
Skip Brandon, former FBI special agent, stand by with us. We're going to go back to our Audrey Barnes, who is on the scene there near the Pentagon. Audrey, give us an update.
The update is police are here right in front of the Pentagon, not letting people get any further than this point. They're saying that another plane has been hijacked, and at this point it is now 10 minutes outside Washington, D.C., and police are telling me reports are that plane may be headed to the district, and they're speculating that it may actually be headed back here to the Pentagon. All Pentagon employees have been evacuated from the area. Hundreds and hundreds of people have been ushered across the bridge and out of harm's way. As you can see, there are perhaps 50 different emergency vehicles still on the scene here. The fire is not out. Eyewitnesses tell us it looked like a 767 commercial aircraft that crashed into the Pentagon building this morning. There are bits of debris of that plane scattered across 27 across the lawn of the Pentagon into the woods. A couple of joggers said they even saw debris
Audrey, let me break in.
in
Let's
the area.
focus for a second on this developing situation. Help us sort out who is saying what, who is saying that another plane's been hijacked. Just sort that out.
Here,
please.
there's
Take your time.
Excuse me, officer. Can we talk to you for a second? That officer is the car just tried to sneak by here and is headed to the Pentagon building, and they're telling everybody. Let's see if I can get him to update us on exactly what the situation is here. Officer, we want to just find out what the situation is. We're told another aircraft is coming towards the Pentagon.
We have another threat, ma'am. The